Have you ever wondered how prison sentences are determined for different crimes in the United States? It's a question that's crossed many minds, and today we're going to dive into it. We'll be navigating the complex, often misunderstood world of the American justice system, specifically focusing on prison terms for various crimes. From the mildest offenses to the most serious felonies, the range is vast and the penalties differ greatly. The severity of the crime, the defendant's previous criminal history, and even the state where the crime was committed can all play crucial roles in determining the sentence. It's a multifaceted process, with judges, juries, attorneys, and sometimes the public playing a part. In this video, we'll not only explore the different categories of crimes, but also delve into the factors that influence the sentencing process. So buckle up and get ready for an enlightening journey through the American justice system. Let's start small, with the misdemeanors and petty offenses. These are the minor infractions that we're all familiar with, perhaps even a little too familiar. Picture this: you're rushing to work in the morning, accidentally going a few miles over the speed limit. That's a traffic violation, a classic example of a petty offense, or perhaps you've been caught with a small amount of marijuana in a state where it's still illegal. That's a minor drug offense. Then there's petty theft, which is just what it sounds like. It's the act of stealing something of relatively low value, typically less than $500. So if you swiped a candy bar from the corner store, you've committed petty theft. Now these might seem minor, but they still come with consequences. You're not looking at hard time, but you could face some hefty fines. The exact amounts vary, but they can range from a few hundred to several $1,000s. And that's not all. You might also be put on probation, which means you're under supervision and must meet certain conditions like community service or attending a substance abuse program. And yes, for some misdemeanors, you could even end up behind bars. Now, we're not talking about years in prison, but rather short jail terms. How short? Well, it's typically less than a year. Again, the exact length varies depending on the offense and the state where it occurred. But don't let the term petty fool you. While these offenses may be on the lighter end of the crime spectrum, they still carry weight. They can affect your employment, your housing, even your ability to get a loan. And this is just the beginning. We've covered the small stuff, the misdemeanors and petty offenses. But what about when the crimes get bigger? What happens when you're charged with something more serious than a traffic violation or petty theft? These are the lighter offenses, but what happens when the crimes get more serious? That's what we're going to dive into next. Now let's delve into the heavier side of the law, felonies. Felonies represent a category of crimes that are considered more serious than misdemeanors. They carry stiffer penalties and can lead to long-term imprisonment, life sentences, and even the death penalty in some states. Let's take burglary, for instance. It's not just a simple case of theft. Burglary involves entering a building unlawfully with intent to commit a crime, typically theft. The severity of the sentence depends on a variety of factors, such as whether a weapon was used or if the building was occupied at the time. In some states, burglary can carry a prison sentence of up to 20 years. Then there's assault, a crime that involves intentionally causing bodily harm to another individual. A simple assault might be charged as a misdemeanor, but when it escalates to aggravated assault, where a weapon is used or severe injury is caused, it becomes a felony. This can lead to a sentence of up to 15 years in prison. Drug trafficking is another serious felony. It involves the manufacturing, distribution, or possession of illegal substances on a large scale. The sentencing for drug trafficking can be quite severe, with penalties ranging from 5 years to life imprisonment, depending on the quantity and type of drug involved. In some extreme cases, when large quantities of highly dangerous drugs are involved, drug trafficking can even warrant a life sentence without parole. And let's not forget about white-collar crimes such as fraud and embezzlement. These are non-violent offenses but are considered felonies due to their serious nature and the large amounts of money often involved. Convictions can lead to significant prison time, hefty fines, and restitution to the victims. Felonies, as you can see, carry heavy penalties. They represent a significant breach of societal norms and laws, and the justice system responds accordingly. But our journey into the world of crime and punishment is far from over. There's still a lot left to unpack, a lot left to understand. Felonies carry heavy penalties, but there's still more to explore. What about crimes that are so severe that they warrant the most severe punishment? Capital crimes, as they're known, are offenses that can potentially lead to the most severe form of punishment, the death penalty. For starters, let's delve into some examples of these crimes. Treason, for one, is considered a capital offense. This crime involves betraying one's country, typically by aiding the enemy or working against national security. Espionage or spying is another capital offense. This crime involves gathering or delivering information about national defense with the intention to harm the United States or aid a foreign entity. Another common capital crime is murder. However, not all murders are considered capital crimes. Only those that meet certain criteria, such as premeditated murder or murder committed during the course of another serious felony, can potentially lead to a death sentence. Now, you might be wondering about the sentencing guidelines for these severe offenses. For capital crimes, the punishment can be as severe as the death penalty or as lenient as life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sentencing depends on various factors, including the specific nature of the crime, the circumstances surrounding the crime, and the offender's criminal history. In the United States, the death penalty is a legal punishment in some states, while others have abolished it. When the death penalty is imposed, it's typically reserved for the most heinous and egregious crimes. The method of execution can vary from lethal injection, electrocution, to even firing squad, depending on the state. On the other hand, life imprisonment without parole means the offender will spend the rest of their life in prison with no chance of being released. This sentence is often imposed when the death penalty is not an option, or when the judge deems it a more appropriate punishment. Capital crimes represent the most serious offenses, but how are these sentences decided? How does a judge decide on the appropriate sentence for a crime? This is a question that often stumps most people. The sentencing process is a complex one, shaped by a multitude of factors and guidelines. For starters, the sentencing process kicks off after a defendant has been convicted or pleaded guilty. At this juncture, the judge steps in to determine the appropriate punishment. However, they don't do this in a vacuum. They are guided by what is known as sentencing guidelines. These guidelines provide a framework that outlines the range of sentences for different types of offenses, but the story doesn't end there. Not all crimes, even if they're the same type, are created equal. This is where mitigating and aggravating factors come into play. Mitigating factors can reduce the severity of the sentence. These might include the defendant's lack of prior criminal history, their age, or perhaps their role as a minor participant in the crime. On the flip side, aggravating factors can increase the sentence. These can encompass the severity of the crime, the harm inflicted on the victim, and whether the defendant was in a position of power or trust. For instance, a crime committed with a high level of violence causing serious harm would likely result in a harsher sentence. Moreover, the impact on the victim is another crucial element in the sentencing equation. The court will consider the physical, emotional, and financial toll of the crime on the victim. Sometimes victims or their families have the chance to share their experiences through victim impact statements. These narratives can provide a more personal context to the crime, further influencing the sentence. So, the sentencing process is far from arbitrary. It's a blend of guidelines, individual factors, and the real-world impact of the crime, all woven together to determine the most suitable punishment. Now, you have a better understanding of how prison terms are determined. So, what have we learned from our journey through the American justice system? We've navigated the spectrum of offenses, starting from petty crimes and misdemeanors, stepping up to felonies and major crimes, and reaching the gravest of all, capital crimes. We've seen that the prison terms for these crimes vary widely, reflecting the severity and impact of each offense. We've also explored the sentencing process, understanding that it isn't a simple, one-size-fits-all approach. The court weighs in a multitude of factors, from the nature of the crime to the convict's history, to determine the appropriate punishment. More than just retribution, we've learned that the intent behind these sentences is multifaceted. It's not just about punishing the guilty, it's about deterring potential offenders, safeguarding the community, and importantly, rehabilitating those who've strayed. Remember, the goal of the justice system is not just to punish, but to deter crime, protect society, and rehabilitate offenders.